welcome to the channel. So this is the thing I'm going to try doing where I take a look at some of the characters' animations and see how those animations help convey the character's personality and place in the world. As you might have guessed from the title, I'm going to start with the character Albedo from the game Genshin Impact. I chose Albedo to start with because it was his normal attack animations that got me thinking about how Genshin Impact does all of these different attack animations for all of its characters. So I might end up saying the same thing a bunch of times, but bear with me please. So, spoilers up ahead for Albedo's character lore. For those unaware, Albedo is the chief alchemist of the Knights of Favonius and he carries a deep secret. He is not a natural human, rather he is a synthetic person created through the art of alchemy. He was left in Mondstadt and taken in by a friend of his master slash teacher slash mother of sorts after being taught the art of alchemy and has resided in Mondstadt ever since. Many consider him a genius, although he doesn't see himself in that way. Albedo is normally quiet and focused on gaining more knowledge for his alchemy projects. When he speaks, in the English dub, he's usually straightforward and logical in his approach, with a neutral, almost soft-spoken tone. He rarely raises his voice or expresses deep emotions. He has a tendency to be reserved around other people, preferring to maintain some distance even with people he considers his friends. However, it isn't that he dislikes people, as his official introduction states that he treats others with kindness and that he's polite and graceful, never hesitating to lend a helping hand. His reservations stem from his personality, he finds social interaction tiring, and his history. If regular people were to ever find out about his origins as a synthetic person, there would likely be a lot of trouble not only for him but for everyone in the vicinity. He does have interests and skills outside of alchemy and has occasionally shown himself to be a bit sarcastic. So, how does some of this get conveyed in Albedo's animations? Well, let's start with his normal attack string, Favonius Bladework Weiss. Or Weiss? It's probably Weiss. Albedo has 5 different attacks for his normal attack string, not including his charge attack. The first is a simple downward swing, there's nothing particular about it, it's the second move that lends itself to Albedo's personality. So on the second move, you can see that Albedo brings the hand without the sword up and behind him with a horizontal strike. This pose, one hand held behind the back, has a certain degree of restraint and nonchalance to it visually, while also, according to my brief moment of research about it, being an actual action in certain styles of European sword fighting in order to keep the empty hand safe and stabilize the swordsman. It suggests a certain level of practice and control. The third attack goes by really fast in the game, but when you slow it down enough, you can see that Albedo crouches before doing a quick twist, jumping off the ground into the air as the sword swings in a full circle around him. What's interesting for me is how effortless this action feels, very similar to an ice skater. It has that elegance, no excessive movement or loss of balance, very tight motion. You can see how his arms stay close to the chest and how his legs don't really spread at all, only opening up when the sword swings. The intention and the sense that he's done this many times before all come across in how stable he is. All of his animations keep to a pretty tight line. The arm not holding the sword doesn't often extend away from his body or even move unless it's following his momentum. He basically returns to a vertical line before his fourth attack where he thrusts his sword forward while letting it go, and it floats through a magic circle before returning to his hand. This is the attack that made me think about these animations because I personally find this one a bit jarring. The sword stops and floats in midair, weightless and removed from the previous attacks. Albedo barely moves the entire time this thrust happens, so you have Albedo perpendicular to the sword, not even using his body to influence anymore. I think what this does well though is it gives Albedo that distinct feeling of otherworldliness, letting the sword float away as a hard contrast to the more natural movements from earlier. It also causes the last attack in his attack string to feel almost out of place to me, with the sword returning and Albedo making his widest movement, a downward spin that he extends his leg out for, his empty hand on the ground for balance. It does have a very finishing move kind of feel, as if the floating thrust was there to throw his opponent off balance before using the low sweep to take them out. This attack also has a really strong suggestion of weight and force, since unlike most of the other attacks, Albedo tilts forward and sets his weight down with the sword as he swings. It's also the only move where he has to brace himself at the end compared to his other attacks that are fluid with each other and less weighty. There's this feeling of efficiency to the whole thing, a sort of, I can end this in 5 moves. There's fluidity, Albedo is always in control, it's stylish but not obnoxious or overly complex, he's not constantly making his body take up a lot of space in his poses. There isn't a lot of suggestion of force. Since he's usually keeping his body pretty tight and vertical, all of his attacks have less weight. I think it does well in capturing Albedo as a person while also still being cool and flashy for the sake of appeal. It matches with how he's perceived, it's cool, elegant, knowledgeable, and hints at a separation from the natural with the fourth attack's floating sword. I also like that it shares some similarities to Jean and Eula's attack animations, considering that all of them have Favonius Bladework in the name of their normal attacks. As you can see, all 3 of them tend to make big rotations in their attack movements, with Albedo's and Eula's having dancer-like spins. They're very waltz-like when attacking, and it is actually distinct from other Mondstadt characters like Kaya or Bennett. Interestingly enough, Diluc also moves similarly to the Favonius Bladework group, but without the dancer-like flair, and considering his backstory, that actually makes a lot of sense. If we take a look at Albedo's skill, Biogenesis Solar Isotoma, if I said that wrong, that's just how it is, It's fairly straightforward. He raises his hand up and slams it onto the ground, causing an explosion on impact and also creating a solar isotoma. Also, it's a really neat detail that the explosion effect is in the shape of a flower. I just think that's really cool. Despite the explosion, Albedo gets up from this almost totally unaffected. He only slightly adjusts his shoulder, and the nonchalance in this movement really sells that this might as well be an everyday action for him. There's effort involved, but it's not so much that he's blown back by it. Albedo's burst, Rite of Progeniture Tectonic Tide, or Progeniture? I don't know, is similar to his second and fourth attack animation, but cooler. He closes his eyes and lets go of his sword, bringing his left hand behind his back as the sword disappears. He seems to gather energy in his right hand before sweeping his arm across his chest, causing this massive explosion, all without moving his feet or the hand behind his back. His expression is totally neutral, and as the explosion happens, Albedo doesn't react to it. He faces it dead on, feet firmly on the ground, poised. All is within his expectations. It's super cool, and the little wiggle of the wrist at the end really completes it. Even all of that didn't take that much out of him. So that's it for this video. It was fun. The attack animations in Genshin go by really fast, and you get used to seeing them, so it's nice to spend some time and take a good look at what they've done to really sell a character. I think I'll be doing more of these since there are a lot of Genshin characters to look at, and Genshin's kind of been my life for the past year, so I'll leave you with the most ominous thing that I think Albedo's ever said.
Like her, I am a pure alchemist. I live for academic knowledge.